I'm just going to look down and read my notes. I guess I'll just start with talking about these photos. This is from 2015, the Pan Am Games. That's Andre DeGrasse winning the 100-meter final. This was shot with a tilt shift from like the top of this building. And the idea of my slideshow here is I'm going to sort of tell stories. I'll put two photos together and it'll sort of come from a story that I've worked on. And a few years later, I was able to photograph Andre for a cover of a running magazine. So I just thought it was cool, sort of following his journey. I worked for a newspaper in Markham for a bit, and so he was local to Markham. This is a story I worked on for Maclean's magazine. I was staff at Maclean's for a little bit, so I would super fortunate to travel to all these really cool places. And this is Grassy Narrows, where they have like mercury in the water. It's just a super tragic story. We were there for a different reason. We were telling the stories of a couple Indigenous children that died running away from residential schools, froze to death, and I mean, it's hard to just not see the mercury poisoning. This is Steve Frobisher. He's an elder in the community, and he's sort of, anytime media comes in, they chat with him, and he was really cool. This is just normal assignment work. Like, this is covering a TFC run a couple years ago. Before they played Montreal, all these guys would march from Liberty Village to the stadium. I don't know, I think this is such a cool contrast because you shoot the game and this is a completely normal, like, wire sports photo, but you have that stuff, like that photo before, that is this bizarre celebration. It just looks like a protest almost. But yeah, another sort of two photos from the same assignment. This is a pretty tragic story too. This is Razak. He's from Ghana. He lost all his fingers to frostbite crossing the border into Manitoba, trying to claim refugee status. It was kind of a big story. There were two of them that came in on Christmas Eve one year. And this is sort of a close-up of his hands. This was a story from Maclean's. We spent about a week and a half with them in Winnipeg, and they just a couple months ago got refugee status in Canada. This is kind of you'll see, I shoot a lot of sports. This is kind of my favorite assignment. Get sent to a football game and told not to shoot any football at all. So just kind of shoot around the event and find these little moments, and yeah, just stuff like this. I just love sort of turning around when other people would be shooting the other way. I just love looking at everybody's face in this photo. There's obviously some play developing. This is a cool story I worked on for Maclean's. This woman is working at she is working the phones for the Democrats. This was the Trump election. This is Ottawa County, Ohio, and this was this crazy story that writer Nick Taylor-Vasey found. Ottawa County had picked the winning presidential nominee every election since 1964 perfectly. So the story was sort of about America's perfect voters. It was 13 elections in a row, and it was the longest streak in America. So we visited and hung out for about a week and sort of just saw the people, and these are going very fast. This is the story I worked on for the Globe and Mail about Canada's national women's sledge hockey team. It's an insane story because they are self-funded, and the men's team is completely funded and supported by Hockey Canada. It's just insane, but it was so cool. I spent all of training camp with them, and I just love these sports stories, sort of unconventional, something that needs to be told and given amazing access. And it's kind of like a catch-22 because it's not in the Paralympics, so it's hard to get support to go to the Paralympics. But it was a really cool story to work on. I was super fortunate to follow the Tragically Hip's last concert around Canada for Maclean's. This was in Kingston, outside on the top of a building for their last show. Media wasn't allowed in the arena, so we kind of had to make do with what we had. This is Gord. So I guess today is the 1-year anniversary since Gord died. I just heard that not too long ago. But this is from his show in London. This is kind of like This photo keeps popping up everywhere. Maclean's uses it for every tragically hip story, so it's kind of like one of my most famous photos, and people always send me articles when it pops up. Every year I try to convince someone to pay me to cover the Rogers Cup, and it works. Like every year it just keeps working. And I make this photo every year, and I can't stop doing it. Like I just love the tilt shift. This was last year when the women were in Toronto. This is Venus Williams, just kind of like working with those dudes that stand right in front of you, trying to make it work. This was after she lost a point in her elimination match, as you can tell. This is back to sort of another story surrounding refugees for Maclean's. This is Emerson, Manitoba, which is this tiny town on the border, and it was sort of the most popular border crossing before Quebec happened, and everybody would go through Emerson, and the town was just, there was like 200 people that lived in the town. It was just full of media, and right after the Trump election, and this woman crossed, she's from Djibouti, she crossed with 3 other women 5 weeks after the Trump election, and she wanted to not be identified, so we sort of came up with this photo, and she was cool with it. I was very frantic.